I would disagree on the PPP program and calling it a marathon, at least right now. It's been nothing but a sprint. And that sprint, at least phase one of that sprint is over. Phase two, in all likelihood, will come. And so I just wanted to, give that perspective. I am acutely aware that of the people on the call that I would venture to guess because of phase one, I have raving fans out there, at least half of them, not on this call, but just sort of take a snapshot and anecdotally with my business. Half of my clients are raving fans. The other half, I probably wouldn't turn my back on them right now. They are pissed. And so I just, I'm mindful of that, and I'm mindful of the stress. I say I'm mindful of it, but I don't keep payroll and I don't hire people. And so it's sort of shallow coming from me. But let me sort of offer you sort of perspective on the program, and then more importantly, look forward and answer any questions you might have. This was launched in late March. Banks were assigned the task of administering the program. We were given initial guidance of 15 to 30 days. Once the program was announced, 15 to 30 days to get our ducks in a row. President Trump had a press conference on Tuesday, March the 31st, which time he said, PPP will be up and running this Friday. We will accept applications, and even better, we'll have same-day funding. For all practical purposes, that was the news to the bank, so to every bank. And so we basically were forced, all banks were forced to build a processing system to accommodate the applications and then push them through to SBA for approval. So just high-level numbers, just again, just as a perspective, through the last 12 days, SBA has approved 1,035,086 loans, totaling almost $350 billion. That is a 44,416% increase from the 58,000 loans that they approve on any given year. On the part of Pinnacle, we took over 12,000 applications in 12 days. That represented almost $2.3 billion of loan applications. And of that, we were able to get approved, but not yet funded. And we'll talk about that in a second. But of that $2.3 billion, $1.7 billion was approved. So, I say that as facts, as perspective, but I am acutely aware that means nothing to the business owner that didn't get approved for this, and there are many of them in our bank and many others. That's heavy, but it is what it is. And I just wanted to sort of share with you the daunting task. With regards to Pinnacle, I have no doubt that there were some banks that probably processed much better than us. I have no doubt that we did much better than other banks. And so we can talk about that if you'd like, but it was a daunting task, and I just regret we couldn't help everybody, at least not now. I'll start with, or I'll end my comments and let Lane sort of give you a roadmap of where we think we're going. But a couple of frequently asked questions that we get, and I'm getting from my clients right now, it's not a question, but it's more of a statement. You had my app for almost 2 weeks. I put it in almost day one. It was first come, first serve, and you're telling me I didn't get approved. What's up with that? Well, I don't have an answer that I with any definitive methodology that I could point to that talks about our processing. I'll tell you, in the case of Pinnacle and just the process in general, it was extremely manual out of the gate. One of the things about in the manual in terms of the review, and let me back up for a second. Keep in mind that the PPP loans, the primary attraction for you as a borrower is the forgiveness of these loans. And that is contingent on eligibility and you providing everything that's required. The primary attraction for the bank, other than helping our clients, which is definitely something we want to do, is also that forgiveness. And to get that forgiveness and make sure we don't have a bunch of loans on our books at the end of that 8-week period, we also have to make sure guidelines are followed. And so at the beginning of this process, we handled every application manually. And so that was the first weekend. We got most of our applications in that first weekend. We were told to slow it down a little bit because we had this new processing system called Numerated that was going to be launched. A processing system that typically takes 6 to 8 months to build, and we were able, with the help of Numerated, a third-party fintech, we were able to put it in place within a couple of days. But that's not to say that there weren't glitches and there weren't problems in the process. So all that explanation in terms of, the time frame and what the hell happened, first come, first serve. The priorities of the processing with every bank was a challenge given the lack of systems. And then, to be really honest with you, at my own risk, I think the path of least resistance was to focus on those applications where we had existing client credit relationships. And the reason for that is simple. We have all the paperwork for that client. We have all their financials, and it was a quick application process to get that application, review it, and know that it was probably in good order. And so that's just my observation. I have no proof of that, but I think most banks adopted that focus on the client. And then finally, the Numerated system was launched, and unfortunately, it was launched too late. We did our best, but we didn't have it up and running in time to get all the applications through before the money ran out. So that's the number one question and point of contention, quite frankly, and I don't blame you. It's frustrating, but I just shared with you the process as I understand it. What's next? Well, let me state what's now. If you've been funded, if you have an SBA number, then your money has been reserved. You have nothing to worry about. You should be getting documents from Pinnacle or other banks very soon in the form of e-documents. You will sign those, and then the forgiveness window starts from the day of funding. And Lane, you're the SBA expert, so if I'm butchering the details and the guidelines there, feel free to jump in. But
you're right.
I beg your pardon? So
you're right.
Okay, good. Just give it time. That'll change. But if you have a number, your money is reserved. There is nothing to worry about there. What happens, and again, I'll stop right here and let Lane go. It's very likely that additional funding, we're hearing numbers about $250 billion will be appropriated. I don't see how it couldn't be. It'll be interesting to see what kinds of strings are attached. So what happens to the applications are in queue? Well, we are making sure we are continuing to review the apps and make sure they are in good order. And once the process or this money has been appropriated and the process has been determined, and I'm sure it's going to go through the same E-Trend system, and for us saying Numerated, I am confident we can quickly submit those in short order and get the SBA loan number and reserve quickly. So, Lane, do you want to talk quickly about sort of where we are today post phase one and where you think we're going?
Yeah, Kev, I'd be happy to. Thanks for giving a brief update of kind of what our experience has been at Pinnacle. I've talked with other banks as well, as I'm sure you have, and this was definitely a very difficult thing to get implemented in a really short amount of time. And we've still got a lot of work to do. So even on the loans that we did get pushed through the system, that did get approvals, there's still a lot of work to do on those going forward. So, some people may be in the process of getting documents, like you said. Some people may have actually already signed documents and sent those back in. You were right that on the use of the funds, that 8-week clock that starts, it's going to start on the day the funds get deposited into the business owner's account. And one of the things that we've been doing here at Pinnacle is sending out a spreadsheet for the business owner to kind of track how they use those funds. Because I think the draw and the major benefit of this loan program is the loan has the benefit of being forgiven at the end of it if you spend the money appropriately. And so as far as kind of a normal SBA process goes, this loan was kind of done in reverse of a normal SBA process. So the things that SBA would normally be looking for to determine if the client is eligible for the funds, they're now going to be looking after you spend the funds to make sure that you spent the funds on eligible uses. And so I'm just preparing business owners that they need to be keeping really good records and tracking this money, because that's going to be how you go back and prove to SBA that it is a forgivable loan. So at this point, any bank that offered this program, the bank approved it in-house and just requested for an SBA approval number electronically. So there was no going to SBA to determine, one, if the client was eligible, and two, if how they were going to spend the funds was the correct use of the funds. So now on the backside, we're doing all of that so that the loan can be forgiven. So once you get done with your 8-week time period, you're going to have to go back to the bank that you got the money from with all the documentation. And then that's actually when the bank is going to go to SBA. We haven't gone to SBA on any of our loans at this point. So we will go to SBA on the backside to be able to get that forgiveness done. And so the SBA has told us that we can start doing that at the end of June. So once you've used up all the funds over your 8-week time period, hopefully you've used 75% of those funds on payroll. And then you can use 25% of the funds on mortgage interest, rent expense, utilities, as long as those expenses were expenses that were in place as of February of this year. February 15th is the date. So that's something important to remember as well. So you're going to have to provide that documentation. So more than likely what the SBA is going to ask for is documentation that those utilities were in place on February 15th. And then you're going to have to provide us documentation that you spent the money that we gave you from the loan on those utilities, and you spent the money that we gave you from the loan on the payroll cost. So that's why it's really important to keep really good records, because if you want this loan to be forgiven, the banks don't make the call on the forgiveness. It's going to go to SBA, and SBA is going to be one that makes the call on forgiveness. And the better your records are, the better. The higher likelihood that you're going to have your loan forgiven. I know there's a lot of people out there joining us today that maybe didn't get in this round of funding. And so we're really hopeful that we will get another round of funding, like Kevin was saying. Congress is actually not in session this week. They still have the ability, if they wanted, to do a roll call vote to try to get something pushed through, but I don't see that happening this week. At this point, I think it's going to be next week, and it may even be another week from now. I mean, we may make it through another week next week where we still don't have a definitive answer, but I think that the consensus is we're going to get more, but it is going to be really important that business owners and just anybody out there call your congressman to let them know how important that this funding is, so that we can make sure that it gets prioritized to the top of the list, to let them know that there's going to be some businesses that just will not make it if they don't get this funding. So that is kind of my look down the future. I unfortunately don't have that magic crystal ball to be able to say when that extra money may be coming, but just be ready. If you haven't been able to get in for the first round, make sure you have your documents ready to roll for this second round. I'm sure most banks will be doing kind of what Pinnacle's stance is going to be. We're going to make sure that once the new funding's rolled out, that any applications we already had in process that for one reason or another didn't get in under the first round, that those all go in first. And then after we get all those processed, we'll start taking new applications. So don't be surprised if you reach out to your bank and they tell you, to wait and send your application in once that new funding is done, because their focus is probably going to still be getting the ones pushed through that for one reason or another didn't make it through in the first round. I know we have some questions out there. If we want to go to some question and answer, I guess, Kevin, you and I can decide who wants to take it, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Jay is shepherding that, right?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jay Graves. For the first time in 6 weeks, decided to take the day off, and then was recruited this morning. So I'm at a farm in the middle of nowhere in Alabama, on a cell phone hotspot. So technology does work. We're living in an amazing time that's unfortunately also interesting. So I've one of the EO members that have tried to dive into the data and tried to dive into PPP and CARES Act, and actually made the mistake of reading the bill, and just tried to learn as much about this as possible and see what information that we could help get out to people that's fact-based. And I've gone through all the questions that have come in, and also people in my forum and people that I've talked to, and I kind of have them divided into three buckets here. You know, kind of the underwriting and approval questions, the uses of the fund, and then what other options are out there. So I'm going to pick some out, and at the
Jay? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, we lost Jay.
Does anybody else have the questions?
Mary, you're muted.
There he is. You're back.
Jay's back.
All right, I'm back. All
Can
right.
you send me the questions in case we lose you again?
Yep, I'm going to go through the, I will do that. I'm going to go through the WFU real quick. At the risk of repeating myself and repeating some of the answers that you've already given, I hope that we can do this as kind of an emphasis. There are several questions about, hey, tell me more about my place in line. Lane, you mentioned this, but I really want to emphasize this. There's one in the panel here. There's one from Will Wilson at Cheesecake. You know, how, and I have it in, I didn't get my loan number before it ran out. Am I really first in line? Is that something that you can either emphasize or provide more detail on?
I mean, I can really speak to it from Pinnacle standpoint. I don't know how other banks are going to handle it, but from a Pinnacle standpoint, 100%, they are first in line. Those are escalated to the absolute top of the stack for us, and that's going to be our number one priority the day that this funding is available again. You know, honestly, that is all that our workforce has been working on over the past 2 weeks. So we've designated 100% of our employees, you know, even people on our teller lines that may still be working a drive-through window. When they weren't having clients come through the drive-through line, they were helping to process PPP applications. So every employee at Pinnacle is on board with this right now. And the second that it goes in, those applications that are already in process, those will get pushed through our automated system very first before we even put another application into it.
Jay?
Yep, I'm here. I'm going to go with straight video.
No.
Straight audio. So I'm going to switch to lots of questions from lots of people. Hey, I've got an SBA number. I actually, in some cases, I actually e-sign documentation. When is funding going to happen?
We are soon, and I hate to be so vague, but the documents have been signed. You've got a loan number, and I believe Lane, correct me if I'm wrong, but the funding needs to take place within 10 days of the documents being signed. So that's responsibility on our part. So, and is that 10 business days, Lane?
Actually, at this point, it's just 10 days. So not 10 business days is what we were believing, because most banks, and including the SBA, we've been working weekends to make sure that this money goes out the door. So it's 10 days from the day that we pulled the SBA E-Tran approval number. We have to get that money into the client's account. And then once it goes into the account, that's when their 8-week window begins. But if they haven't received money yet, it should happen really, really quickly. I mean, some people are having it happen the same day that it gets sent in. Now, one thing I will say, because my husband fell into this trap, and I don't know why he did this, but he asked for a check to be cut, and he couldn't understand why it was taking so long for him to get his money. And I said, well, flip it to direct deposit. Sure enough, as soon as he sent his banker the request that he didn't want a check cut anymore and he wanted it through an automatic deposit, it was in his bank account within 30 minutes. So if you have marked, I don't know, from another bank's perspective, but from a Pinnacle perspective, you had the option of having it automatically deposited into your bank account or a check cut. If you requested a check cut, that's just going to take longer because of the process of physically cutting a check and mailing it to you. If you need it quickly, hit the direct deposit. That's really going to be the best way. That's also going to be the best way to track the money as well, is if it went into one account and then you use that one account to help track the spending of it on the backside.
Lane, just to clarify, once the documents are signed, at what point can we, or should they expect funding? If we've received
I mean, they should expect it within 24 hours if they requested it to be automatically deposited. If it was a check, that could take up to 2 weeks to get them a physical check. Okay. But that check, the day that check is cut, that's the day that their 8-week window begins as well.
Okay, so I've got several questions on the 8-week window that have come in. Is the 8-week window starting at the funding date something that has been clarified by the SBA? Because the actual bill itself is vague about that. The bill itself said maybe you could do a look back period, but are they 100% definitive now that the 8-week period starts when the money is deposited?
Yes, that was defined by SBA. So they have had several what they call interim final rulings that have come out. They're on interim final ruling number 4 that they've released.
That seems like a bit of an oxymoron, interim final. But I'm going to let that go.
Welcome to our world, Jay. They released new guidelines on partnerships. When was on Wednesday night or Tuesday night? Those new guidelines on, again, sorry.
They've almost been coming out every night, Kevin, since the program came out. But yes, the most recent one that the Treasury put out, I believe, was Tuesday evening. They clarified again. And it's a running document that they have that's out there on the Treasury website now. And each time they add to it, so they're just numbering them, the issues that they were addressing in their interim final ruling. They're on, I think, question number 30 something now. It started when they issued the first interim final ruling. I think there were 12 questions that were addressed, and each time more questions get brought up. So hopefully you guys can understand what we're going through. This is a program that was still being written while it was already being rolled out. So people have compared it to, a plane being built as you're actually flying it. And that's pretty much what we've been dealing with. And we still haven't been given, the SBA is still writing the rules and regulations as to how the forgiveness will be applied and how that will be documented as well. So even though people have gotten their funds, they're out the door, the SBA may come back and tell us something that we were not aware was going to be the case because we haven't even received the rules yet for exactly how that forgiveness component is going to work.
So do you recommend that businesses that receive funding actually set up a separate account for this to ease the documentation burden, or is that not required?
If they already have an account in place and it's pretty easy to track, I don't necessarily think a client needs to go open a brand new one. But if they have an account that's got a high volume of transactions going through on it, and when they send those bank statements over to the bank, it may be really difficult for the bank to understand the ins and outs of the money, the inflow and outflow. So if it's easier for them, they can open up a separate account. But if they have a good accounting system and they don't have an account that's got a high volume of transactions coming in and out of it daily, I would think they'd be fine just putting it into their regular operating account. Given the understanding that they probably just use one general operating account for their daily expenses. Now I know, like a lot of our business owners, you may have multiple accounts and have sweep accounts and all kinds of fun treasury management products where this would be a little bit more difficult for a company like that to try to track. But if it's pretty simple, basic accounting that your company operates under, I don't think there's any reason to go open a whole new account just for this.
Okay, some follow-up questions on that. And this goes back to the 10-day period. If a business is a Pinnacle customer and they have signed the documents with you, and it's more than 2 or 3 days since there's been no funding show up, should they reach out to you? Should they?
Well,
Yeah.
let me there. That was in a FAQ somewhere. Yes, definitely reach out. But it's we've been told it'll take a few days even after the documents are signed. So, but if that is an issue and you've got a concern, by all means, reach out to me or whoever you're working with at Pinnacle, and we'll try to get an update. But again, if I think, Lane, correct me, but as long as they have a SBA number, that money is reserved for a period of time.
Correct. If they've already signed documents, then they have an SBA number. We can't create the loan documents without having that E-Tran SBA approval. So as long as they have that E-Tran SBA approval, regardless of if you've received documents, and then definitely if you've signed the documents, your money's reserved. It may take a few days, like Kevin's saying, just for it to work through our back office of getting all these processed. We normally fund, maybe 20 loans in one day. We're funding, 20 loans every 10 minutes right now. So it's a lot higher volume than we're used to running through our funding desk.
Okay. One question that just came from the webinar is, it's a two-parter. Can you define utilities? Like do we have any idea on interim rule 7J46 from the SBA, what they're going to let you count for that, other than it can't exceed 25%?
So that is a good question. And I haven't seen a specific definition of utilities. But what we do know is, a utility, meaning a water bill or electric bill, something like that, that's normal business operations for your business, as long as you can prove that that service was in place as of the 15th. So I'm assuming, and I may be told wrong at some point by SBA, but I'm assuming those utilities could also include, we're in spring season right now, and if you have a business that has a lawn care service, you're probably having to have that taken care of a couple times a month right now. So that would still be an average utility cost. That's a normal expense, monthly reoccurring expense for your business, that those can be included. Now, what cannot be included in utilities, because I get this question a lot, is like marketing expenses, those sorts of things. They're not using advertising and marketing as a utility, but those expenses could have been covered under the EIDL program if they got funds from that program, but shouldn't be using the PPP loan funds to cover those sorts of expenses that may be average monthly expenses for your business, but not necessarily qualified as a utility.
Well, I'm going to use that as a great segue, because a great question came in. Okay, so maybe I didn't get funded this time in this round. What other options are out there for me as a small business owner that I possibly can take advantage of in terms of getting some capital?
That is a great question, and I wish that we had some really good options at this point. The PPP funds have expired, and in addition to those funds having expired, the EIDL program has halted as well for new applications. They haven't said that it's necessarily run out of money, but I think they have so many applications in the system right now that SBA cannot physically process all of them. So they've put a halt on that system as well. So there's not another program really readily available from SBA at this time. They do have what's called the SBA Express Loan Program, and there are some SBA Express lenders out there. Pathway Lending is one of those, and Pathway Lending also has a rapid response loan fund that they're using to help business owners affected by this. That fund was actually put into place to help with tornado victims when that happened right before we went into Corona crisis. But they're using this fund to also help businesses that have been affected by Corona. So if you are a business in Middle Tennessee and have access to Pathway Lending does have some potential loan options that could help right now. I'm normally not a big fan of going into credit card debt, but this would be one instance where, putting some stuff on a credit card just to be able to get you to where the PPP program, you can get in for the next round. That may be an option, but there's not a lot from a banking side that we can do to put into place really quickly. Kevin, I don't know if you have any other suggestions there on alternate financing.
No, right now, well, it's case by case, and we're more than happy to look at that. But right now, I think in terms of emergency type of relief from a financial standpoint, we're dependent on these government programs for all practical purposes. So,
yeah, they are going to be rolling out street lending programs here really soon, and those will be for businesses that for one reason or another were not eligible for PPP, but there may be some alternate relief under that program as well for some small business owners. And then one thing I know that I've done for a couple of our clients, it's not necessarily new funding, but if we had a client that had an existing line of credit that was maxed out, we've gone and increased it, by 10 or 20,000 just to kind of help them get through. So if you do have an existing facility with a bank, maybe going to see if they could quickly increase it. That's going to be a lot easier to do than doing a whole new facility for somebody.
yeah.
Yeah, this is great stuff, Samara. There's a whole bunch of things that actually just came out there that hopefully we'll be able to put together and send out to folks on like Pathway. I didn't know that. And obviously great idea to go talk to your bank to see if there's any additional leeway that's available out there. And you mentioned it before, and for the benefit of those that may have come late, I mean, you said, and this is all a guess, and I can't hold anybody accountable for this, but likely Congress may look at this in the next couple weeks. Does anybody have any idea how long that would mean it would take to fire things back up again? In terms of PPP?
Yeah, Jay, that is a good question. So it could move a lot faster. So when we had the first CARES Act put in place, the program did roll out really quickly, but they created a whole new program. Now they're just refunding an existing program. So essentially the day that it gets passed, it's got to pass the House and the Senate, then the president can sign it. Once that money gets turned back on with SBA, that should only take a day or two. It's not going to take the SBA another week to kind of re-implement the program. Now that it's an existing program in their arsenal already, they can just turn that switch back on in E-Tran, which will allow the banks to begin pulling E-Tran numbers again. Right now, we are physically, if we put in a PPP application into the SBA system, the only adjustment we can make is if we need to decrease a loan amount. We can't go in and increase any ones that we've already pulled, and we cannot pull any new ones. But the second that this gets refunded, it should really only take a day or two at the most for those funds to become active and for SBA to flip that switch again.
Hey, Lane, Jay, may I interject my own question? I guess I will. Looking at several of the loan requests that were put in, you mentioned E-Tran, and for those that don't know what E-Tran is, it's basically the pipe between the bank and SBA, and it's well documented that there was a lot of issues with it going down during this entire process, and that happened with a lot of our loans. So those loans that were put into E-Tran, which I know for a fact includes some of the folks on this call, but we got the E-Tran error on that. What happens when the funds open back up? Is it just the pipe is open and it just goes automatically? Is that, or am I oversimplifying it?
Well, no, Kev. So that was a lot of the problem that we had, and why we couldn't. And this went for every bank, because I was talking with people at Regions, and I was talking with people at Renaissance Bank, and I was talking with bankers across the country, Live Oak doing it through their online platform. When E-Tran went down, if you were using an electronic type batching service that was communicating directly with SBA, that caused problems with your application, because it's all done electronically then, not manual. And so as the bank, we're batching maybe 100 loans at a time over to E-Tran, trying to pull those E-Tran numbers. And when E-Tran went down, which it crashed and went down several times during this process, we have to then re-enter all of those and rekey that request again. It's not that once E-Tran goes up, then those that you already entered go through automatically. When we get an E-Tran error that it gets rejected, it gets thrown out, and we've got to go back and make sure that we grab the loan that got rejected and get it back in the system with E-Tran. And so I think that was a big part of the problem as to why the banks could not process these faster. Every time the E-Tran system crashed and went down, especially if you were utilizing some sort of electronic submission over to them. There's two ways a bank can do it. They can do it to where, like, our software, which was numerated, talks directly with E-Tran and pulls those numbers. Or you can do it to where the bank's just manually inputting it. We have access through our computers directly to the E-Tran computers, to their servers. And you can do it manually one at a time that way, or you can do it the electronic way using the software speaking to each other. When E-Tran went down, those loans that really had the biggest problem, Kevin, were the ones that were done through an electronic batching type process, and they've all got to go back in again. So it's not that E-Tran's going to automatically pull those that got rejected and process them first. So that's how then some clients that maybe applied after the people that got rejected in one of those E-Tran going down, they might have gotten their loan approved ahead of somebody else due to the SBA system crashing and just the timing of that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, long answer.
Let me throw a couple others out here, and this has to do with a lot of our EO business members. There was an incredible amount of confusion about whether owner draws could be included in the loan or not in the loan. Has there been any interim ruling on that? If you got a loan and that wasn't included, is there any option of opening it back up, or are you just out of luck?
That's a great question, Jay. And yes, the SBA did come back and finally, so they gave us guidance in one of the interim final rulings that they wanted owners' draws to be done separately as a self-employed. And then they came back in the fourth interim final ruling and said, well, we've changed our stance on that. If you own a business and you have employees and you take an owner's draw, then include your owner's draw in with the average payroll for your business, which is different than what they had said in one of the previous rulings. And so we had a lot of clients that were in limbo, that they originally submitted their request to us and they had included their owner's draw. We made them remove the owner's draw because SBA said to process that as a self-employed instead of with the payroll cost. And then they came back a week later and said, just kidding, you can now include those owner draws in the payroll cost. Yeah, unfortunately, if your loan did get funded, with the owner's draw not included, the SBA is not allowing for you to go back. You can only get one PPP loan. Now their option is they can still apply as a self-employed and get that money, but they can't go back, add it to the payroll for their company PPP loan. They would have to submit a separate request as a self-employed through that 1099 self-employed loan application, and they could still get the money for their self-employment draws, but they can't go back and add another second PPP loan for the business to include that owner's draw.
Okay, well, and that all depends upon a next round of funding, I assume.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. There's no money left right now where we can. And that, Jay, that does seem to be, I got a couple of phone calls yesterday from people that were really mad that didn't get their money pushed through. And they said, well, the banks are holding on to this money. You guys as Pinnacle, you can still push loans through even though the SBA has turned it off. And that's not accurate. I mean, it is technically the bank's money that we're lending at this point and putting out on the street. But we cannot go and pull any new SBA approvals to make sure that we're reserving the money on the backside to be able to have the forgiveness component of it and that guarantee, since the SBA has reached their maximum capacity on the funding for this first round.
All right. There's a great question from Chris Corby here, and I'm going to ask it as written because I think that I think that maybe you could shed some light on this as well. If I have an SBA number and received my e-sign email from Pinnacle, is there any risk that I wait for a few days to sign and return? I'm trying to be strategic about my loan origination date, but I definitely don't want to risk not getting my loan.
It's got to get back to us within 10 days of when we pulled that E-Tran number. And that E-Tran number that we pulled may be different from the date of the loan documents. The date may not be the same. So if it goes past that 10-day window, the money goes back to SBA and we cannot go back out and retrieve it for that client.
Right.
Time is the essence.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a secondary question that also came in. You keep saying this E-Tran number, I'm paraphrasing. How do I know I have one if I applied?
Call your banker and they can provide it. So,
right.
Yeah, that's as simple as that.
Okay. So it is my banker, whether it's at Pinnacle or some other bank, can say, yes, you have an E-Tran number and they can read it back to you.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then how about, I'm going to go back to the utilities question again, because there's a follow-on to that. Could this include my monthly accounting system fees and technology and SaaS platforms that I run, i.e. not marketing, but anything that is a recurring, back office business expense? Do we get to account that as a utility in this?
We don't have any guidance from SBA yet on exactly what, if that would be what they would deem a utility. We're deeming utilities right now just kind of as water, electric, gas, what you would normally say as a utility. So until SBA gives us final guidance on that for the forgiveness component, I really don't want to speak one way or another for specific questions like that.
Okay. So I think that's good. I'm gonna throw out a couple of the harder ones that came in, just because it's some people have some good questions. This was a tough one. Will Pinnacle disclose a list of businesses that they gave SBA government loans PPP to?
We will not, for the simple reason that would be a severe breach of client confidentiality. So absolutely not. And again, Lane could probably elaborate on this, but I'm sure that once the government forgives these loans, there will be a list of clients that receive that forgiveness, so I'm sure it will be public record, and you can make whatever observation you like. But Lane, do you expect that list of recipients to be public at some point? I mean, I know the bank wouldn't release it, but would that be available through other channels?
So about 5 years ago, SBA, you could go out and pull, just on the SBA.gov website, you could pull a list of all the companies that received an SBA loan within a certain, zip code, county. The SBA had tons of ways you could search it. They quit doing that about 5 years ago because business owners were complaining about their privacy and not wanting that to be public knowledge. So they quit publishing the exact name of the business that received the SBA loan. What they do continue to publish is, that, hey, Pinnacle Bank did an SBA 7A loan for this business for $4 million. So they're publishing that information. So that's what I see the SBA continuing to do, is give the statistics based off of the number of loans that were done and the dollar amounts of the loans that were done by each lender out there. But I do not see them giving the specific company names because of a decision they made about 5 years ago to quit doing that because business owners were complaining that that was a breach of their privacy. So that's not to say that it is not public record. I mean, these are federal backed, government guaranteed loans. And if you dig deep enough into the federal system somewhere, you could probably find specific business owners' names. But I don't see the SBA publishing those to where it's going to be readily accessible for people outside the SBA to find that type of information.
Okay. I've got one here from Daniel. So I know my application was in the E-Trans system on the 14th. Is there any chance it's approved in this round and they just haven't sent the number yet?
If it went into the E-Trans system, it should have a number.
So Daniel,
it's a difference of the numerated. So Pinnacle uses an electronic system called numerated, which talks to E-Tran, but they're not the same system. So if it's physically gone to E-Tran and it didn't get a rejection, they should have an SBA number. But if it's enumerated and it's still kind of out there, Kevin and I would need to do some research to figure out whether or not an E-Tran number was in fact pulled or not.
all right. So Daniel needs to call and
Correct.
Yes. Okay. And then, and Lane, you mentioned this before, this is for those businesses that didn't get through in this round. I mean, what was the role of the bank reviewing this versus the role of the SBA reviewing this? I mean, how do you have any statistics of, what was the method by which people went, how you and quite frankly, other banks as well went through, how did they prioritize these loans? And Kevin, you brought this up in the beginning, but I think it's worth going through again, because I think there's just so much, either none or misinformation out there about how this process works that we all want to know more for the next round so we can be better prepared for this.
Yeah, I'll let Kevin speak to this as well. I mean, I can't really say how another bank prioritized them, but I can definitely say from a Pinnacle perspective, we handled our bank clients first. And at this point, and still at this point, we really have not opened up the platform to non-clients just because we honestly weren't able to work through all of our customers yet. It's not that we don't want to help business owners that don't currently bank with Pinnacle. It's just that, kind of like your family members, you take care of those first and then you go and take care of the others. And so we were taking care of our Pinnacle clients first to make sure they got the money and then opening it up to non-Pinnacle banking clients. So, I think each banker at Pinnacle was charged with working their own clients. So we gave our bankers a lot of flexibility in how they wanted to prioritize them. We didn't tell them one way or another. We just said, you take your clients and you get them into the system the fastest way possible. So Kevin, you were more of the kind of boots on the ground, getting the applications in, and I was on the back end working.
Yeah. So let me, I would temper that a little bit, Lane, because there was the first weekend. That was exactly what happened. We were reviewing manually, again, making sure that all the documentation was there, redoing numbers if needed, if there's a big discrepancy. And then, again, this numerated system and the rollout of that, it was clear that we weren't going to get through the 12,000 applications without a better system. And so numerated came online. At that point, it was more or less out of my control in the banks, and any other bankers. So we sort of delayed the review and the processing for a slight period of time as numerated was about to be rolled out. And so, that was that. But as far as, this set of loans or size of loans versus this, I wasn't privy to how that was, am not privy to how that was done once the loans left my queue and after I submitted them. So I put them in there with prioritizing, some prioritization, but after that, it was sort of a crapshoot. And then I just heard of some things, some delays that were caused by our anticipation of, you get some feedback there. Lane, you all right?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that said, that was a moving process. I had only so much control with those applications that went in, and once they went in, it was sort of I don't know exactly what methodology you used after that.
All right, so we're down to just a few minutes left. You had brought this up earlier, and I think this is worth repeating. Our members of Congress and legislators need to know about this and how this, both the funding and non-funding, has impacted small businesses. Should we reach out to Congressman Cooper? Do we talk to our senators? Are there any national figures that based on your experience actually listen to this? I think our group would be open to advice for maybe getting a little bit noisy.
Definitely. No, I'm encouraging everybody. So as far as who's going to listen when somebody's calling and wanting to vocalize their opinion on one issue or not, they prioritize those, the senators and congressmen, they prioritize those by their constituents. So if you can actually vote to put that person in office, they're going to listen to your opinion a whole lot more than somebody that's outside of their voting district. So definitely contact whoever your congressman is in your particular area and whoever your senator is. And through their websites, they all have electronic ways that you can submit opinions to them. They all have phone numbers as well, but I can tell you from experience, they don't always, they don't get the phone calls as much as they get the electronic responses that go in. So definitely reach out to them. And I know that for the most part, the ones here in Tennessee, they're some of them, you know, like Marsha Blackburn's even been tasked to be on this task force the president has put together to help with getting the economy back up and running and the stimulus money being part of that. So they're on board, but it can't hurt for them to continue to hear from everybody out there that we really need this money quickly.
Okay. I'm going to be respectful of everybody's time here. Samira, let me know if there's other things. You'd mentioned a workbook for potentially for what's going to be in the forgiveness or not. I think it'd be great if we could get that out to the members that attended as well. I've tried to go through every question that I could see on here. If I missed anybody, please blame me, not anyone else. And hopefully we can forward any other questions that come through. Samira, any parting thoughts or anything else that we missed?
I would love, Kevin, for you just to reiterate one last time, the people who have applied through Pinnacle but did not get the money, what should they do through you? Like if they're in your system, they don't need to do anything except for contact Congress?
Yeah, I mean, they are always welcome to contact me with any questions if I don't contact them first. But right now, unless you hear back from me, you should assume let me take a step back. When we entered, I'm speaking for all my clients, when we entered your application in this enumerated system, you got a series of automated emails, one of which requests additional information. Totally disregard anything along those lines because we've got everything. You are in the system. And unless you hear back from me, your application is in good order and is ready to submit once the new funding comes online and once SBA allows that E-Tran system to work. So long answer to your question, I think just stay tuned, stand by. We'll pass along information as we get it. But if you're in the system, then you're in the system and we will expedite it as much as possible once the new funding comes online and in a process. I don't anticipate any change in the process. Do you, Lane? I mean, it's
No. And in fact, I think through a lot of this, we worked out a lot of the kinks in the system, and I think it'll flow through a little bit faster once it's back up and running. This break right now is kind of giving us a moment to go back in and fix some of the things to help it
Yeah.
run a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah.
And
I've
will
had,
it be done on a system that's kind of chronological? Like if someone did apply early on, they'll be prioritized, or is it all just kind of whoever gets through when it reopens?
No, we're going to be pushing those through kind of in the order that it's there, but they do kind of go through in batches. So we could get 20 approvals all at one time.
Gotcha. Okay. I think y'all did a fantastic job answering all these questions. I'm so grateful.
well, let me just, I wish everybody on the call had gotten some in this first round, and I regret that and apologize for it, but I'm confident we'll be there for the second round and everybody will get the money they need. I just, I know there a lot was riding on this money. So anyway.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Sarah?
See ya.
Take care.
Thank you
Bye.
all.